Okay, so welcome to the First Teachers Business Lunch and Learn. That's what I called it today. We're going to talk about focus because, really, honestly, ultimately, if we can't keep our focus, we don't get anything done. And that's just the nature of the game. So, there are some simple ways I think that really matter for moving your focus forward, right? Like, we have to be able to keep ourselves moving forward in any given moment. How do I move to the next? Okay. So to start with, when we're talking about focus, what we're really talking about is basically the definition, which I always pull out of Merriam-Webster because I used to work with the guys that run it. Britannica owns Merriam-Webster, and I worked for Britannica for a long time. So the Merriam-Webster people are like my people. I know some of those people that write that stuff. Is a state or condition permitting clear perception and understanding, which is like Merriam-Webster speak for focus lets us concentrate. It is letting us like tune out the rest, turn on our brains, but it's also knowing what we want to be doing in a given moment. Because what happens to us a lot is we're trying to focus on one thing and our brain is trying to think about three others. And that's not actually focus. Like that doesn't help us at all. In addition, focus is really, at least for me, that in here it says permitting clear perception. So it is that clarity of thinking that, like, hey, I know not only what I want to be doing, I'm doing one thing at a time, but like I know why it matters. I know what it is. I know completely what it is. I know what I'm going to do next. It's that clear thought process that goes along with actually concentrating on one thing at a time. So focus really is more than just put your head down and work. It takes more than that, which is why we need to like give it a little more credit than that. So focused is not a couple of things. I think everybody recognizes these more quickly than they recognize the rest, right? But focused is not multitasking. Multitasking is not anything really. Multitasking is trying to do three things half-assed at the same time. Cool. Like, that's just the truth of it. Multitasking not existing. Focus is also not sleeping. Period. Like, you can't focus if you can't sleep. Like, remember the days when you had new babies and you were like, what? And you couldn't remember a whole sentence, let alone concentrate on anything. Good gravy. It is not skipping lunch. It is not doing all the things at once. It's not doing all the things ever. It's not sitting all day or being at your desk all the time. Like, I know people that tell me that they think if they would just sit down at their desk more, they would be more focused. One has nothing to do with the other. Quite honestly, I've had a couple of clients who I've asked to use shorter work days. Because sometimes when we spend too much time here in this space, we have too much time to play with. And then we get lost down the little hole over here, and we get lost down the little hole over here. And when we have too much time to play with, we don't have to like put our heads down and clarify. So if you find you're wiggling all around and you have time to wander away, well, you could be doing more interesting things with that time, probably. Like all the things that you think you don't have time for now, there it is. So focused is not those things. Creating focus really for me is about, and really, if you know me at all, everything basically for me is about keeping things simple. More complicated is less focused. Just the long and short of it is that. Simple, when we keep things simple, it's easier to keep them clear. It's easier to keep them streamlined. It's easier to keep them in the front of your brain. Like the research in teaching is very clear. You can only keep so much stuff at the front of your head at once. Like think about the last time you tried to do math, when you were trying to think about how to solve a problem. You added wrong because you were thinking so hard about the new stuff that the stuff that's automatic buried at the back of your brain didn't come out right. That's normal. Like that happens all the time. People make goofy math errors. That's why everybody should check, because even people who are good at math can't keep it all up at the front all the time. Like, that's just not how it works. So the less we keep here at the front of our brain, the better, because then we get to actually concentrate and move from one thing to the next. So that's part of it. So we are focus for me. There's this like base level set of ideas that we have to agree to almost about focus. Focus is something we create. It's on us to create our own focus. It is something we make for ourselves. No one can do it for us. Like, you have had a kid somewhere in your house, in a classroom, you've had a business friend, you've had a friend where you thought to yourself, if I could just get them to focus. Like, I used to have a boss like that. And I used to think to myself, like, if I could just get him to concentrate on one thing for an hour, we would get so much more done. And he was like trying to catch a bunny rabbit in a bag. Like, oh my God, all the time. He was like, we would joke that I was going to slip ADD meds in his water because he was like constantly everywhere. But like, I couldn't create his focus for him. He had to do that. And he was just terrible at it. Like, that's just the thing. It's also within our control. Like, to believe that you can create it, you have to believe that it is yours to control. And it is, but not everybody agrees with that right off the bat. Like, you don't think it is in your power, but it is. You think, like, I have all these things competing all the time, and that's why I can't focus. Well, you get to choose to not let them compete. That is in your control. And it's a choice. So it's like the same thing 16 times. That just is my brain sometimes. Like, let me say it 12 different ways. Sometimes when we're not focused, what we have to be willing to admit is that we're choosing not to be focused. Like, it's hard to admit that to yourself, truly. Like, I have times where I'm like, oh, this is me hiding by doing other things. That sucks. That's a sucky thing to realize and have slap you in the face. But it's what happens. We have to be willing to admit that we were doing all the easy things first, that we were hiding from that scary thing by covering it with 47 other things that we didn't have to do. We all do it. It's normal. So here are my 5 favorite ways to create focus. They are super fun. Here's number 1. You cannot be focused if you don't know what's on your plate. Truly. Like, how can you concentrate when you have a constant stream of collecting and like trying to keep track going through your brain? You can't. So it is your job to dig in and figure out how you keep track of all the things. It is 1,000 times more effective if you do that on paper somewhere. I don't care where you put it on paper. I was just having a discussion last night with a very dear friend who has a planner problem. And she was like, I just bought a new planner, but it's not here yet. And I was like, how many planners for this year do you have? She was like, I don't want to tell you. And I said to her, like, maybe. She was like, right, but I can't fit all the things from my circus. This is what she said to me. I can't fit all my circus in my planner. Like, well, maybe just buy a notebook and use 2 pages. I don't know. And for me, that's what I do. My strategy is I have lots of things going on. And I'm going to show you this, even though it's embarrassing. But I use my notebook. And on one side goes the week, and on the other side goes the day. And this lets me join all the parts of my circus together at a given moment. Everybody has their version, but this is the place where all my stuff goes. And that is the only way I can hope to keep track of it all. Certainly holding it in my brain is not the strategy for me. It's not the strategy for anybody. And I know that there are people that are like, no, it's not a problem. It's all in there. But it's like when you lay down at bed at night and the first thing that happens is you have those bubble thoughts pop up. I think of them as like anti-gravity. The minute I lay down, they surface. Like, I just imagine like bubbles popping out of my brain. Because you can't hold it all. And you spend a lot of energy trying to hold it all when you could just write it down. and save yourself a lot of heartache. So that is one. The second, and this is a bigger chunk, is to balance schedule and flexibility. So a lot of times we have this idea in our head that our day has to work a certain way. Like it's supposed to look like this. I'm supposed to sit down at my desk at 8 o'clock and I'm supposed to work until 4:30. And then I am supposed to finish all the things. And this is how it's supposed to work if you run a business, which apparently comes out in Swedish Chef. But you have to be you. You cannot use a work schedule that doesn't fit you human. It doesn't work. You know it because you've tried it and it has felt horrible, right? Like for me, for example, if I try to write anything that has any sort of emotional connection to it at 9 o'clock at night, I am doomed to failure. Like they turn into like sobby, squishy, like it's awful. Like it is, I cannot. But I also have found over time that as much as I am a morning person, I am a terrible writer at 9 a.m. Unless inspiration has struck and I need to like drop something out of my brain, I'm a much better writer like mid-afternoon. And for whatever reason, like I don't think I should be like that. I think it should be in the morning. It makes more sense. But I've had to accommodate my work schedule to understand that about 3:30 I'm a really good writer. So towards the close of my day, I tend to write posts for the next couple because I spend way less time on it at that time of day. If I sit down to do it at 10 a.m., I don't get anywhere. And so I spend a half hour frustrated, and then I spend 15 minutes at the end of the day doing what I should have just done at the end of the dang day. So look at your patterns, look at your style, embrace that sucker, because that's what matters. Also, so you're embracing your style and you have a bunch of different things to do in the day. What you can do from there is block time for the things that matter. But the idea in this is to create some sort of flow. You know sometimes that you go from one thing to the other and it feels really abrupt. Like, for example, before the holidays, I worked December 23rd. My mother-in-law decided that Christmas Eve was December 23rd, which was fine based on weather. But I went from a client call from 12 to 1 to at 1:15 unwrapping Christmas gifts and making Christmas Eve dinner. It was like running into a brick wall of crazy. My brain could not turn that fast. I was like a mess because it just was too abrupt of a shift. I was just like, and now it's Christmas. Like, okay, here we are having a holiday. Like it was so weird in my head. You don't want to do that to your brain on the regular. And there are things that you have to do in your day that kind of would go together better than others. Like for me, I tend to write posts and write in my journal and sort of do the work for my mastermind, the things that involve my brain. I do those things together. Sometimes I try to group client calls together, but that doesn't always work. But in between client calls is when I do things that are live. I do workshops. I do lives in my group. I do recording for the podcast because I'm in the like flow of talking. So I fit those in between. And I save the times, the larger blocks for like putting together the thoughts in whatever different ways that happens. So I can have some sort of a flow from thing to thing, and it's not all so abrupt all the time. You have things that go together better than others. Just embrace that. Also, it's imperative to balance getting lost in the weeds with taking the wider lens view. In your week, odds are you spend a crap ton more time in the weeds than in the wide lens. So I find it really useful to like block myself some time. And what I do every day is almost every day, I'm not perfect at this, is I try to take 8:30 to 9 in the morning to do the view out. Like that's my zoom out time. Like, what does this look like in 3 years? What do my clients at the end of next year think of me? All of those things. Where am I going with this? I don't talk to people before 9 anymore just because I can't. And this time is too important. So schedule time to be deep, but also to step back. And maybe you spend more time stepped back than you spend in the weeds. So spend some time in the weeds, but give yourself both. And then the last thing, and this is sort of like a productivity hack a little bit, is to combine tasks with time. Here's what we do. We write on the to-do list, create workshop. And then it never happens because it feels like it's going to take 3 days. And it's on like Tuesday's checklist and you have 15 minutes. Whoops. So one of the things I do all the time, and like people here make fun of me a little, is I'll write create workshop 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes on my planner. And then I'll take it 30 minutes at a time or 20 minutes. It depends on what it is. So I combine the task with a couple of blocks of time, and then I know I can fit 30 minutes in somewhere over the course of the week a couple times. It's not so insurmountable, but like I get to check it off my list if I spend 20 minutes on it today, and that's enough. Like I have a new thing I want to try, and on my to-do list this week, which I have to do this afternoon because it's the end of the week, is to spend 15 minutes on it, and I'm surely going to do that today. You'll get more done in 15 minutes than you think. And that's really handy. Okay. The third kind of focus is about separation. And I think separation is something that 2020 broke, quite honestly, in so many ways. It is the boundaries in our lives that we used to have. And we don't anymore. So like it really matters for focus to know when your work time is. It matters to know when you're going to exercise that day. It matters to know when you're going to stop and hang with your family or, like, God forbid, eat lunch. It matters to build in those spaces. Here's the thing. People want it to be like, I start at 8, I eat lunch at noon, I exercise at 4, I do all these things. Yes, that might work once a week. And on Tuesdays, it doesn't. So don't do it like that on Tuesdays. Do something else. For me, I tend to be an early morning worker outer. But like today, it didn't work for me, so I'll do it later. But I knew that's what today would look like. So give yourself the grace and allow that, but build your boundaries, even if you do it one day at a time. Knowing like, I'm going to work today from 9 to 11 and 2 to 4. Does something for your brain that you get to subconsciously plan for those blocks. And that makes a huge difference. Okay. The other thing that I think is really important in this 2020-21 time is where you are working. So if you're feeling like you're really out of focus, it could be the space. Like, is it the same space everybody else is in? Because that might be the problem. And I understand not everybody has a space, and that's fine. But it could be that, like, I'm not going to lie, there were times in the spring I worked in my car in the garage alone, because that was the only alone there was. And that's okay, but sometimes I just had to concentrate for a while. So I have a minivan and I would go sit in the back and spread out my stuff. And like, just think for 20 minutes. Like, take your space. Wherever that is, I'll sit in the backyard sometimes or wherever, but like grab a corner that you can have you sit in the closet for a little bit. I've done that too, I'm not gonna lie. Like, if you need quiet and to concentrate for a little while, go find a spot that works for that. There is a place. Okay. So, no, that's the same slide again. Oh, that's not the same slide. Whoa, pardon me. One last boundary. There is time in your business working at what you do and there is time on your business, building it. You need both. So if you're only ever working on, you need to build a boundary between on and in. And that really matters. It's something to think about periodically and think like, am I in my business or on my business right now? Because if you're talking to people, you're in. And if you're just like creating stuff, you're on. That has to balance. Okay. Number 4 is vital and short. Only change things you need to change. We lose focus when we like follow every shiny thing that walks by. It's hard not to because some of the stuff is so cool. But just because you're in a different setting, maybe you came from teaching to business, whatever, from something else to business, it doesn't mean everything else needs to change. Just change what isn't working and don't decide it isn't working until it actually isn't working. Somebody will say to me like, well, but if I get all these clients and I do all these things, I'm going to want a system to keep track of all that. Well, great. When you get all these clients, we do all those things, we'll make a system to keep track of that. Don't solve a problem you don't have yet. Solve the problems you have right now. Stop solving 2 years from now problems. Solve today problems. Only focus and change on what you need to change today. And then the last one is to manage the expectations around you. So you have to use your voice. You have to communicate what works for you. You have to tell the people that live in your house. You have to tell the people you work with. You have to tell your clients and customers. You have to go in all the directions. For me, a good example of this was setting aside that morning half hour for myself. For a while, I would just, if somebody wanted to talk at 8, we'd talk at 8. If I wanted to talk at 8:45, we'd talk at 8:45. If they wanted to talk at 4:30, they'd talk at 4:30. I don't do that anymore. I start at 9 with clients and I see basically everybody before 4:30. And then I go get my kids. But I had to communicate that to everyone. That was mine. I have to communicate to my husband when I have an evening thing. I have to communicate like when he has to stop yelling so I can record a podcast. There are times we have to talk. I also, so in that managing expectations, it's who do you need to talk to about them? What are you asking for? And also why it matters to you and to them. So if you can answer those questions, you're going to have a better conversation than you might otherwise. Managing expectations is about connecting to why it matters all the way around. And that's a big deal. Okay, so I am going to pause the recording, I think. Okay, so this is where I'm going to stop the recording. Now we're going to go to questions. Oh, actually, no, I'm not. I lied. Let's do the questions here because then I have see everybody's name. So talk to me about what was useful today. What's the first thing you want to walk away with to implement?
One of the things for me was when you said, don't solve the problems you don't have yet. I jump so far ahead of myself sometimes, and I'm like, I don't need to think about that yet. I don't even have a client, so I don't have to think about that yet. So, yeah, a different setting doesn't mean using different tools and trying to reinvent and trying to think ahead. And so that's one thing.
There's something about being ahead, right? You don't want to make problems for yourself.
Right.
But you don't need to implement a system that will like track 1,000 people when there's 2.
Right.
Like
exactly.
It's like planning for your lottery winnings before you've won the lottery. Like, let's win the lottery first, kids. Then we'll spend the money.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
Mine was the time blocks. I like, I'm pretty good at brain dumping some point during the day, or at least a couple times during the week, to say like, these are all the things that I want to get done.
Yeah.
But then creating that focus as to, what's happening during the times that I have. And, again, my schedule keeps changing. So what works today won't necessarily work next month, but I can't get focused on that. I need to focus on, well, what do I have today? Like, what can I put that block into today and make that happen?
Well, and even if you're
Schedule change
planning
and figure it out.
2 days at a time, okay. Like, you're just going to keep planning.
Right.
Honestly, I am somebody that could plan a month at a time and it wouldn't work anyways. I don't think it's going to change, and then it does, and I'm like, oh, oops. So even if your schedule was regular, it's not actually regular.
Right.
We
And
expect
even those
regular.
20-minute blocks, I liked that too. Like, just, yeah, it's a huge project, but if I work on it for 20 to 30 minutes, I can make a lot of progress in it. So breaking it down that way and knowing, yes, that's what I want to do. Like, I still have stuff I need to do for the website. But yeah, I don't have to look at the entire website at this point. What's my next step? And give it 20 minutes.
Yes.
So I like that.
And you'll get further than you think.
Yeah.
What questions do you have, Penny?
Well, I had how, but then you answered that. So how do you focus? What does that look like? Because my mind goes everywhere. And
I continually go back to, like, I have like reflexively, and I'm going to talk about this in the group in the next couple of days. I think this idea of reflex questions. I continually think, wait, does this matter right now? Like, is this the thing that's most important in this moment? Because I'll catch myself and I'll be like, ooh, does this matter right now? Probably not. Like, if I'm thinking that question, then the answer is probably no. So for me, it's that. And it's also like, I'm a pretty relentless list person, but I try really hard to be careful what I put on the list and not put so many things that it's not going to happen, but also respect that, like, not all the things on my list are always going to happen, and me being super tied to it is super crazy. So I try to just balance that a little bit, but every day is different, right?
Yep.
Every day is special. Okay. So some things, you guys know who I am. I coach teachers one-on-one, and people who teach in their businesses. We grow stuff and it makes money. Nice. I have a group. You want to join it. If you're not already there, that's how you get there. I have a podcast and there's a website. And if you ever want to get in touch with me, I answer email. I'm one of those people. But also Facebook messages and LinkedIn messages and all the things. So other questions before we go, and it's okay, like, if you have them.
Will you share this recording?
Yes, that's what I'm going to do. The recording is going to get shared Monday. I'll post it in the email, and then the next topic for next week will go. And actually, whoa. I'm going to